doing that. So I think that's a nice way to get started. And I'd like to introduce Adrian, who will be talking to us about in investing locally and the way our money goes back into the community. And certainly for Soil Sangre de Cristo, the way it works, it's a what we call peer-to-peer revolving loan fund, where we give this money out to loans for farmers. And when they do pay it back, it goes right back into the loan fund and goes out again to another farmer. So it stays in our community and keeps growing and building and investing in our community. So with that, Adrian, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Is the sound okay?
Yes, for me
Great.
it is.
Cool. Well, first I'll say I'm so grateful to be able to be among this group, and thank you to PJ and Julie for initiating and creating this beautiful thing that's emerging as Soil Sangre de Cristo. I think it's going to be an amazing boon to this community. So I think I do want to keep this formal, and also I'll say that I'm still learning how to share and present this information and offer it. So if there's a point where I say something like doesn't make sense or is terribly said, like make a note in the chat, because that's good for me to understand how to better improve sharing this information. So I just want to offer that and invite you to chime in any way that feels productive or kind. So and then the other thing I'll say is I think I'll take us on a little bit of a journey, but I feel like part of my job is to kind of build context around where local investing can fit in our lives, can fit in the path to a better future, and in particular, the path to solving climate change as one of those big challenges that we're looking at over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And then, yeah, so I'm going to lead us on a journey to get there, and I want to talk about kind of the bigger picture of investing, what it looks like, and where local investing fits in, and how I see that playing out for us here. So with that said, I can do a screen share, right? Should be able to do that. Julie, is that working? What are we seeing? Oh.
I think I may have made you the host just now. So we're seeing your screen, Adrian.
Okay, cool. So
monkey.
Seeing the monkey. Cool. All right.
I see you on the right, and I'm hoping I haven't made you the host. But if you have, then if I have, you may have to send it back to me at some point.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think I just have to stop share if I want to, but yeah, as long as we're seeing this, I think this will work great. I wanted to start with this slide because it's like, I feel like we come out of the womb just ready to freaking solve problems and do this thing. So I put this in there, and then I realized, it's kind of, there's a resemblance to one of the classic we can do it movements in recent history. So I start that way because I believe, and I think there's a bit of pessimism right now around the world, and maybe rightfully so. I certainly think it takes crises and pain for humans to change things, but at the same time, I'm deeply optimistic, and I think guided with the right tools and solutions, we can do a lot of amazing things, and things that I don't think we've attempted or even think that we can do yet. So yeah, I want to start on that optimistic note. Quick background about myself. Many of you probably know this, but 10 years ago, I started an organic food company called Yum Butter when I lived back in Madison, Wisconsin, and grew that from a little farmer's market stand to being sold in grocery stores all across the country. And we did some cool innovations with our packaging, with our ingredients. We also had a business model we called buy one, feed one. So anytime somebody bought a packet or a jar of Yum Butter, we helped feed a child with malnutrition in Guatemala and Haiti, and helped serve over 1 million nutritious feedings to kids with malnutrition, and or get them anti-parasitic pills in places where that was more important. So I've kind of been in the business and the social entrepreneurship world for quite some time, and really love it. I love the opportunity where business can change an environment, but it's also a challenge to do that. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also wrote this book, The Do-Gooder's Guide to Investing, and put it out last year. I was hearing more and more people, a lot of my peers say, you know, I'm making some good money now. I got a tech job or whatever, and you know, I'm not necessarily doing something good with my life, but I want to at least do something good with my money. Like, what can I do with it? And so after, you know, enough people asked me, I had enough people that I knew inside of the investing space after raising money inside of the impact investing space and being a social impact investor over the last 10 years or so, just kind of DIY on a very small scale, but also started my career in finance. And I noticed early on that where the money went, the attention went. And so I said, what if we can create a easy to use resource for people who want to do good with their money. They want to earn a little bit or a decent return on their money because some of their money needs to grow probably for their needs. But they can put it in things that align with their values. Things like affordable housing, renewable energy, local investing, food system investing, microfinance, the list goes on. And so I basically spent 3 years researching and putting together some of the best, basically the whole investment universe for what I call impact investments, and then also try to build in a strategy in part of the book to show people a more holistic way to invest their money that performs in many different market conditions, so that their money is safer and they have a little bit more autonomy. They're not just listening to their financial advisor who's saying, no, just stick with this or just do this, but they have more knowledge, more resources to invest wisely and grow their money, because I think it's important for each of us to be able to grow our finances over time to suit our needs, and then we can choose to do with that what we would like to do. And I'll also point out that there are a ton of resources at adrianreif.com that are free spreadsheets with everything I'm going to mention today, different portfolios and stuff that's way too much to talk about, but I wanted to get those resources in one spot and in a free way for people to go dig in more if they want to. So what are we really trying to do? I know we're talking about money, we're talking about business, investing, local investing, food, but in a sense, another thing that I view my role as just kind of in the work that I do is helping us think about new stories, a new imagination. How can we see the world in a different way? And this is so hard to do because from the moment we've been born, we've been conditioned to see things a certain way. And I'm not saying there's no grand conspiracy in my mind that's conditioning us to do certain things, but there is an external environment that is forming us and shaping us and has created the conditions and the habit patterns that we exhibit now and put into the world. And that manifests in our actions, or how we spend our money, how we invest our money, how we run our businesses, how we run in political office if we're a politician. All the things we do in the world, I think, are expressed through our conditioning. And so I believe the next 10, 15 years are really critical to starting to uncover new stories about how the world can be, because the world is the way it is because we've designed it to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. There's no objective truth that says this is how it is. So that's another thing that I hope impact investing and the different examples that I'm going to share tonight show that there are different ways to do this, different ways to build beautiful things. And then, so we're talking about money too. I think I've shared this before, but I view money as kind of it's a tool in some ways. It's like water. So a lot of water on a loose hillside can cause a landslide, wipe out houses, take out lives. that same water directed properly can quench the thirst of millions of people. And so money is like water in the sense that it's how we direct it. And I think money actually follows the path of least resistance. So we've kind of got to channel it in a certain way and see it do what we want it to do. And then in my book, I kind of put forth this idea that if we have this is a lever. If you think back to third grade physics or whenever we learned this, I don't know, I don't remember it, but this is a simple lever where we can move a really heavy load with a minimal amount of effort by using a fulcrum. So I'm kind of proposing that what if we redirect money and use it as our lever to move these massive planetary challenges, and they're massive, and they're going to take a lot of small change that's going to add up to a lot of big change. But I believe that money can be a tool for good if we choose to see it that way. And then just a kind of a quick summary of how I've defined sustainable investing or impact investing. And I wanted to keep this really simple because I don't think it needs to be something convoluted, because we all just want to do something good with our money. We want to align it with our values, but I think we can agree that if it stops ecological destruction, that's a really good thing. If it regenerates ecosystems, that's a really good thing. And if it creates a safer, happier, healthier life for us and our fellow humans, that's a really good thing. So when I talk about investments, I'm looking at things that do these things in some form or fashion. And I've really tried to like pick out the best of the best that can do that. The investing universe is pretty big. A lot of this is quite new as well. The space, is trillions of dollars globally, and that's questionable on the actual impact front. But these are the areas where I really wanted to focus on and let people see examples of ways that money can be regenerative and sustaining. So we talk about local investing, which we'll get to, investing in poverty alleviation, which is, I think, really critical for our future, diversity and inclusion investing, microfinance, which empowers women entrepreneurs, affordable housing, renewable energy, which is critical for climate change, banks that do good and don't finance oil pipelines, food system stuff, which overlaps with a lot of slow money stuff as well, nature conservation, which will be critical in CO2 drawdown and keeping biodiversity up, given that we're losing 10 species per day by some estimates. And then also in the book, I talk about home investments that make your home more energy efficient and are profitable from a return on investment standpoint. So this is just to kind of give you the context of the ecosystem and different ways that people can invest sustainably. And then I wanted to share how powerful it is too to think about what our money can actually do, because I feel like sometimes it's abstract. Okay, I've got my money with this slow money group. I've got some money in this fund and I'm in some affordable housing, but what is it actually doing? And so I tracked the impact of what $100,000 in a portfolio of combined investments could do from an impact standpoint. It could finance 10 poor women entrepreneurs around the world, reduce 2,000 pounds of coal from being burned, install 5 kilowatts of solar energy, support 3 organic farming families, thanks to slow money and RSF, add energy efficient windows to your house, keep 3 Americans in their homes, and finance 1 healthy food store in a low income community. That's just $100,000. And the cool thing about investing, and Julie and PJ mentioned this about the revolving loan fund, that this is kind of your revolving loan fund. It's going out, it's being used, but it's coming back to you and then slowly growing over time. And so it's quite different from philanthropy in that way. And I think it's a beautiful objective for communities, kind of have this revolving loan fund that grows over time and stays in the community. And then I briefly want to go through kind of a few different levels of engagement for impact investing and how local investing fits in that. So the first level, level 1, this is kind of the base level of like, you could do this tomorrow. Hopefully you do it tomorrow if you're not doing it, but you're probably doing it. And the things I pulled out here that are some of my favorites for really simple stuff are local banks and credit unions. Banks, well, credit unions and then local banks, community banks, typically have a mandate to lend a certain percentage of their money in the community. And so that could be a mortgage for your neighbor or a loan for a small business. So that's a simple, great way to, put your money in a savings account with a local bank, and that's staying in your community. If that's not an option for people, I also talk about Amalgamated Bank, which is one of the only union-owned banks, and they're 100% renewable energy powered. So it's just a cool, big, massive bank, but they're doing a lot of great things. And then Aspiration is another online bank that is kind of a new player in that space, but has a really big heart and is trying to do some really cool things with money. The second thing I'll say is there's a unique organization called C-Note that's run by 2 women entrepreneurs. And C-Note is like a short-term savings account. You earn 2.75% on your money. It's pretty safe. You're not risking a lot of it, but they lend that money out then to women and minority entrepreneurs. And then you get your interest and you can pull it out every 3 months if you'd like. So that's an example to me of ways we can have a win-win where you're making 2.75%, which is way more than the 0.1% you're earning in your bank right now. But then that money's also being lent out to do good and to help bring equity to a lot of places that have been overlooked. So not a lot of my friends love using C-Note just because it's so simple. It takes 10 minutes to set up an account. And I'm not affiliated with any of these in any way. So it's just like a pure appreciation for that company. Level 2, okay, we're taking a step up, got to get a little bit more involved, probably a little bit more impact as well. A lot of this work is more in the stock market space. So I haven't been looking at Woody's face, but he's probably like rolling his eyes when I talk about stock market stuff. But these are some funds that I pulled out, and I know a lot of people have money invested in the market, but I do think there are ways to get your money and send a signal to companies and organizations that are doing much better than their peers. And there are several funds that, like, for example, the 4th on this list, the S&P 500 fossil fuel free ETF is a typical index fund, really easy to invest in your basic account, but it strips away companies that have fossil fuel reserves. So you're not investing in fossil fuel. So it's an easy way if you do have a lot of money in the market that you can't pull out or don't want to pull out. It's an easy way to align your values with that and send a signal to fossil fuel companies and these large investment firms that you don't think the future for fossil fuel companies is favorable, so you don't want to invest in them. So I think that's a really powerful way to send a signal from a climate change standpoint and a financial standpoint. I also want to mention the 5th one on the list, which is a really kind of peculiar class of stock called yieldcos. And I'm just going to nerd out for a quick second on this. Yieldcos are companies that own renewable energy generating systems like large solar farms, large wind farms, sometimes hydroelectric power. But so these companies get contracts with electric utilities, they sell their solar power, their clean energy to the utility, they get paid for it, and then they pay investors like you and me a 4%, 6% dividend on their stock. And you can own their stock in a typical portfolio, your TD Ameritrade, Schwab, whatever, but you're supporting and earning dividends from renewable energy without having to go build a solar farm or put solar on your roof, which you should still do that anyway. But it's another beautiful example of where finance is meeting impact and climate change reduction. The 2 others I'll mention just briefly, but there are some robo-advisors, which for people who don't want to manage their money themselves or they don't want a financial advisor, Open Invest is a really great online advisor platform that kind of automates a lot of the investing process for you, but it allows you to screen out fossil fuels, companies that earn money from guns, people that earn money from deforestation, and again, helps you align your money closer to your values. Earthfolio does similarly. And then there are a couple different financial advisors. There are a lot of different financial advisors around the world, but two that I really like are Conscious Capital Management and Natural Investments, which are kind of like two of the most fiduciary players in the game, meaning I think they're looking out for their clients the best, and that they're most deeply rooted in sustainability. So that's level 2, little step up. And now we'll chat about, oh yeah, quick. I usually just put this in here because people always ask, well, I've heard that sustainable investing doesn't outperform or doesn't perform very well. And we've finally gotten to a point after 10, 15, 20 years of some decent data that just proves that wrong. And this is an example of 3 major companies in the financial world who are talking about ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, another way to say sustainable investing or impact investing, basically companies that are being managed more environmentally and sustainably. That is actually performing better, and it's reducing risk for those companies because these companies are thinking about a constrained future, a future that's going to have more expensive energy if we keep relying on fossil fuels, a future that's going to have less water, a future that could have a price on carbon, so they're going to have to pay more if they're pumping a lot of carbon into the air. But we're seeing that these companies are better managed and they're performing better, and they're carving out market share from a business standpoint. Level 3. This is a little bit higher risk, but and higher involvement, but also a higher impact. And the first 2 I'll mention, the first is American homeowner preservation. I only mention this because it's a beautiful example of innovation that came out of the 2009 financial crisis when millions of Americans lost their home. American homeowner preservation, this company stepped in and said, hey, instead of kicking people out of their homes, we could buy those mortgages and work with the homeowners and keep them in their homes. And they had enough financial savvy to say, oh, and we can pay our investors a nice return. Like their first fund in 2015 pays a 12% dividend. Their current fund pays a 10% dividend. So if you're talking to somebody who's investing in the market and they're all excited about earning 7% or 9% a year, this is just a great example that, whoa, we can keep people in their homes and we can pay our investors a reasonable return. And I think it takes a new story, a new imagination to think about ways we can create these win-wins. Working Capital for Community Needs is a microfinance organization based out of Madison, Wisconsin, that's been lending in Latin America for, I think, about 30 years. And basically, they provide small-scale loans to entrepreneurs in those countries and a way to move capital where, for the longest time, financial services haven't been available to people in poor countries for the most part. And so microfinance as a mechanism of getting money to people who don't have access to it is a beautiful way to impact the world, and you can earn a small, modest return on investing with them. And the third I'll mention, we talked about this on the Agri Summit call a couple months ago. It's a company called Iroquois Valley Farms Farmland Trust. Again, another really innovative model where they take investor money, they use it to buy farmland. They convert that farmland to organic farmland because usually it takes about 3 years to do that, and a farmer who's relying on the income from that land may not have the time or to wait to get that land converted to organic. So they buy that farmland, they own it, and then they lease it to farmers. And about 70% of their farmers are actually young people who want to be on the land, farming organically, healthily, rebuilding soil, sequestering CO2, but they can't afford, they don't have assets to get a bank loan to buy farmland. And so Iroquois Valley Farms has created this financial model that allows investors to invest in the organification of farmland, and allow young people to get on the land. And those investors, who could be people like you and me, can earn, between 2 and 3% on their money. So you're not going to get rich off of it, but it's a way to, again, where the money goes, the attention flows. And so this is a way to say, hey, we can pay you a small return, and that's going to attract a lot more money than saying, hey, we're not going to give you anything. So I think it's a beautiful example. And finally, level 4. This is the top of the pyramid, the people who want to get their hands dirty, you want to, meet the people they're investing in. And the things I talk about for level 4 investing are local investing and angel investing. Obviously, we got Woody here, and we got the Soil Sangre de Cristo group emerging, which is, and I write about this in the Do-Gooder's Guide to Investing, one of the most beautiful examples, I think, of how money can move into a system and stay in that system in a regenerative way, without extracting. So, we think about some of the stock market investments, even in some of the fossil fuel free funds, you're still investing in companies like Apple or Amazon, who might have a relatively lower carbon footprint, but they're extracting. They're trying to get as much money from as many people as possible and kind of funnel it to a few people. And so local investing, I think, is powerful because it creates a connection between you, your money, where that money is going, how that money then finances that farmer or that food grower, how that helps feed 10, 15, 20, 100 people in your community, and how those people come back year after year to that farmer's stand or buy from that farmer. And so I think it's a way to get us closer to the interdependence that I think we've been pulled away from in many different ways. So I think that's one of the examples that I talk about a lot and that I love. There are other ways to invest locally. Cutting Edge X and Investibule are two platforms that have basically compiled different companies that are fundraising money. And so you can search by city and state. You can search by companies that are owned by people of color or women, companies that are focused on renewable technologies. Us being in a rural area and a less dense population, there's none of that happening here. So that happens more on the urban level. But those, I think, are cool examples. And I mean, can you imagine doing that for farmers here, like showing pictures of the farms, or doing that for businesses in the valley, showing pictures of businesses in the valley who are looking to raise money from their community. So I think it's an example of getting to know who you're investing in and creating that connection and that long-term resilience that is a really big topic and buzzword right now. Angel investing, I don't think I'll spend much time there, but that's, for people who are higher net worth and looking to invest in high growth, high potential return, promising technologies. And there are different ways to do that. Start Engine and investorflow.org are a couple of my favorites. And I made my first angel investment in a electric car company a few years ago. I think it was 1,300 people. Each put an average of, I forget the number, about $1,000 each. And so collectively, this company raised a little over $1 million to get to their next stage of financing. And it was a cool way to see how the crowd and how small amounts of money at large levels, again, like the Soil Group is doing, can make a big impact for organizations that are pioneering new things. So I think that's a really cool concept that I love, and is a part of the picture that is impact investing in my mind. From a climate change standpoint, the different things we talked about, and I'm going to drop this in the chat. I outlined, if you want to dig into the different things like microfinance, yield cos, and Clean Energy Credit Union. Sorry, I'm just looking for the chat. I can't do two things at once. But those are all in this link in this article that I wrote for 350 Colorado last month. So that's just a great another free resource if you guys want to look into any of those options. And those are the kind of the key areas that I talk about when it comes to reducing CO2 from an investing standpoint. So I'll pause there and assess any questions that are buzzing around, or thoughts or ideas. We can stop there and kind of open it up. The only other things I was going to talk about, and this may or may not be interesting, it's actually like kind of super detailed, but I talk about how to kind of build an all-weather portfolio. And so if that's interesting to anybody, we can talk about it. If there are other things that are more exciting, more interesting, we can talk about those. So I'll stop. And thanks for taking all that in.
So I haven't gotten a lot of questions in the chat box yet, but I did write something about how in drawdown, our investing, divesting is written up as being one of the most important things to do. Also, investing in women is another huge deal. Have you read Paul Hawkins' book Drawdown, and did you utilize it at all in some of your research or anything like that?
Yeah, I use Drawdown quite often for a lot of the work I do. And then it came into thinking about investing in climate change and how to solve climate change financially, specifically with microfinance. Early on, because microfinance typically invest in groups of women who are using that money to start a business, grow their small business, and or finance their children's education. And so I think in the first scenario of Drawdown, educating women around the world was number 1 or 2 or 3 in the top 5 for sure. I think it bumped down to maybe 7 or 8 in the second scenario, their recent release of the solutions. So microfinance is how we can actually participate in educating women, along with donating to. I have a friend in Rwanda who runs a school for women, and they're educating about 1,000 girls a year, which is really cool. So a lot of amazing things happening like that, where your money can go. Renewables, so large scale solar and wind, I believe are in the, I just looked at this the other day, so I should know, but are within the top 1 or 2 from Drawdown. And so we can invest in renewable energy, actually, almost directly, and get those on your rooftops too. And then food system, healthier food, regenerative agriculture is big. And so local investing, and specifically, finding farmers who are treating the land in a way that not only enhances the soil, but is sequestering CO2 is big. And to be honest, I don't think there's a large scale solution to that. And so local groups like Soil Sangre de Cristo and other slow money groups are probably one of the only ways to scale that globally in a big way, but it's going to have to be done at an individual community level. So that's really important as well.
And let's see if I got any more. No, oh wait, are there studies comparing outcomes in investing and traditional philanthropy?
That's a good question. Elaine asked that one. Yeah, not that I know of. I do know
he might have something on this at the end.
Yeah.
We could take it to him, but
yeah, he would probably know better. I do know there's a challenge towards traditional philanthropy right now, because a lot of it hasn't been measured for so long, as far as the outcomes. And so there's a big move inside of the nonprofit world to measure outcomes. And I think what investing does in some ways is you have direct measurables that are just kind of built into how finance is oriented already. And so you can kind of see some of those outcomes in that. But I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question.
Woody, do you want to, let me see if I can unmute you and see if you have an answer to that. Let's see if I can do that for you. Woody, let's get you Because that's an answer. And I work in the nonprofit sector as a consultant, and I don't have an answer to that. So, Woody?
Well, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello? Yes?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say, you could start and look at some place like the Social Investment Forum, which is kind of a trade association that supports lots of financial intermediaries that have an interest in doing what used to be called socially responsible investing. Now it's called impact investing. If you Google, let's say, impact investing reports, I haven't done this in a long time, but you'll probably come up with a whole bunch of stuff. Most of the big banks, even the biggest financial firms in the world, like BlackRock now, are all talking about impact investing and putting out all kinds of material explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it. I'm not sure whoever asked the question about the study, what you were getting at between investing and philanthropy, the way I heard the question. But certainly on the impact investing side, there are just reams of reports put out by various groups that are, let's say, monitoring and measuring the growth of capital in various kinds of impact investment funds. There's a firm in, I think their headquarters is in the Research Triangle called the Croatan Institute. I believe it's CROATAN Institute. They just put out a big report on actually impact investing in agriculture. But it's pretty big scale institutional stuff. Most of those reports tend to be fairly macro, and they're talking about billions of dollars here and billions of dollars there and very large flows. And I'm not sure it's that useful. I mean, it's useful if you're intellectually curious. It'll be useful because it'll just give you some broad brushstrokes of things. But in terms of your own personal activities, I don't think it'll be that. I don't think you'll find anything that's directly useful, which of course is why I really like the hyperlocal stuff, because there, you can pretty much assess for yourself and with your neighbors the value of the thing you're doing, which to me, I boil it down to that really simple thing. Do you want there to be more small and mid-sized organic farms near where you live? Yes or no? There's an innate value in that I think certainly everybody who's doing slow money agrees with that. There are certainly people in the population who wouldn't see the value of that, and they'd rather invest in Tesla and think there's more value in trying to go to the moon and make a lot of money while you do it. That's a whole nother, that's like the other end of the continuum, right? So I think I'll stop there. Obviously a big topic.
So I'm going to say something, being a nonprofit.
I'll see if I can think of any.
So I'm going to say something around this, being a nonprofit executive director for many years. What I'm seeing in the foundation world is that they're moving away from this idea that everything has to be proven in terms of impact. They want community solutions. So they're coming to us in our communities like Salida and Buena Vista, the Colorado Trust Foundation, Colorado Health, and saying to people that are regular people, not just the people that are heads of foundations, and saying, you have a problem, how can we help you solve it? And they're finding that, and these were foundations that were like making you write up all these logic models so you could prove your impact, and they're changing. They're saying people, regular people, know how to fix things in their own communities, and that we together should work together to change our world. And it's really better to do it locally. And so you look at these big foundations like Colorado Health and Colorado Trust, and they're coming in and they're talking to the people. They're not talking to executive directors of nonprofits, or they are a little bit, but they expect the people that we're helping to be at the table. And so that's what I'm seeing. And so I would say to you that Elaine, that I like investing both in this idea of investing in community through this business model, but I also am a big philanthropist in my community, and I believe in that too, and looking at the problems in my community. So I think you do both. I had to because I'm an expert in this. So. Anybody else have any other questions they want to pose?
And Julie, could I just say one other quick thing about that?
Yeah.
And also, isn't there something to be said about, I'll go back again to this revolving loan model that we have for Soil Sangre de Cristo, that the money stays in the community. And as Adrian pointed out, and we've talked about, it keeps growing over time because people invest in it. And then once the loan is paid back, goes back out again for another loan and continues revolving and growing that way. Isn't that part of what we're talking? And where with philanthropy, where people are donating money, it's great, but there's not that actual revolving concept. I'm not at all as educated about this as you are, or Woody, or even Adrian, but to me, that's an important part of what we're doing with the slow money concept and soil too.
Adrian, any thoughts?
Yeah. Go ahead, Adrian. I'll go after you.
Yeah. Part of the, I'll say philanthropy I think there's certainly a role for it. And there are places that investing or business can't solve. There are things that they can't solve. And so I think there's certainly room for philanthropy. What I've keyed onto over the years is from a behavioral economic standpoint is, like PJ, like you're saying, if people can see their money kind of like staying still or growing or coming back to them, I think there's just an opportunity to allow that money to move differently. Whereas, people see philanthropy, and I'm not knocking it in any way, but it goes out and it never comes back. And like, what happened to that? And obviously there are great orgs using that money wisely, so I'm speaking purely from a behavioral economic standpoint of, is there a way to attract more capital to things that are important inside of our communities? And I think that this idea of seeing that money flow and grow is one that will allow us to do that. So that's just one take on it.
Woody, when you talk about this, we're kind of a hybrid, right?
Well, I don't. You could say hybrid. I mean, so this idea of a 0% loan revolving fund that's funded with charitable donations that stay in permanently is a hybrid of investing and philanthropy, for sure. You could say it's a very philanthropic form of investing, or you could say, but I prefer to call it nurture capital and slow money, just to come up with an entirely different story. If we come back to the way Adrian started, actually, I'd like to do that. I'd like to go back to the beginning. We said, we could tell ourselves a new story. So I think the framework you provided, Adrian, is excellent, because it gives people lots of different places. Obviously, everyone isn't going to be as crazy as I am. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't mean to let my bad. You don't have to dump your entire you don't have to say, oh my God, I'm completely divesting of the stock market. But I am going to say, just for the fun of it, because life is short and I'm still kicking, I have no money. I've never had any money in the stock market for the last 30 years. And the reason is, I'm not suggesting this for anybody, and I'm not bragging, but I'm sharing from the heart of where my impulse to do all this work came from, because I came to a belief that economic growth and multinational commerce was going to start creating way more problems than it was solving over my lifespan. And I still believe that's happening as we're speaking. So now that creates all kinds of challenges of, what do you do with whatever money you have? Do you invest it in real estate? Do you put it in credit unions? Do you put it in CDs? Do you put it, what do you do with it? And, I kind of bumbled along and figured out some stuff to do here and there, which I would never necessarily recommend per se, but that's what I did. Now, from that work, at the same time, I was working as a foundation treasurer and, running an angel network of green investors and doing some of the things that were in some of the categories that Adrian kind of blocked out for my professional life, for my living. And so putting that aside, that was just offered in the spirit of kind of transparency and personal sharing. I would say part of what we are all doing, like part of what we're doing on this call, is lending our energy to the creation of a new story. And if you look at levels 4, 3, 2, I forget the numbers yet, you could probably go back to those 4 levels and say, level 4 is pretty much the old story with a few new paragraphs in it. You know, level 3 has a few more paragraphs of the new story in it. Level, you know what I mean? And as you go up the thing, you're getting to a newer story, which we are all writing together. I mean, we don't have the whole story. If you, I'm sure we've all been paying a lot of attention to the news lately. And this morning, NPR had a thing on where it referred to the UN Secretary General calling for a whole new economy has to come out of the post-COVID thing. You know, there's been a lot of people calling for this, wondering if the COVID thing is going to lead us to some really new economic story of some kind. And I think it would be very naive to just assume just this crisis is just going to suddenly change the whole story. But it can certainly give rise to new stories, you know. And so I guess the only thing it's not really adding anything to what Adrian said. I'm just emphasizing one part of it, which is, you know, as you create a portfolio of things that you can do. Another way, Adrian, you didn't use this language exactly, but everything you said was kind of consistent with it, would be saying, you know, I want to invest my money in a way that does no harm. How can I do that? How can I reduce the harm that is done, you know, indirectly by my investment? So you can reduce the harm by divesting of fossil fuels. You can reduce the harm by not investing in any military contractors. You can reduce your harm by divesting of tobacco companies. There's a lot of things that a lot of people have been trying to do for a long time to stay invested in the stock market, but still reduce the harm that their money is doing. But as you go down that list and you go across to the new story is how do we support the emergence of a whole new economy and a new culture and healthier soil and healthier people? That's the proactive side. And so I hope soil and soil money can be part of a new, or the new, or however you want to say it, story that we can all write together about a radically, and a radical with a small r, not meaning politically radical, but radical in the root sense of the word, a radically new story at the local level about how we put our money together and how we understand our success in using that money. And it will be different than each of those different levels will call us to kind of assess the success of what we're doing in a different way, right? Starting with financial return and going down to when you do 0% return, obviously you're forcing yourself to have a new story because you're not relying on the numbers to tell the story of your success. You're relying on a whole other, some other, you know, value system. So sorry that went on so long. I was just trying to, you know, to share a few things that were sparked by Adrian's.
So you see the question, Adrian, for you about what is your favorite investment you've made personally and why? And that'll be our last thing because I do need to close us up in a few minutes. So, but we have some great things to announce to you at the end too. So, so Adrian, answer that question, and then we'll tie everything.
I do want to answer that, but while we have the Godfather of on the call, you don't get access to Woody Tash very often, I guess, unless you're this group. But I was curious, Woody. So one of the things I tried to do with this book, as you alluded to, is I wanted to create a menu of options for people to choose for themselves. Hopefully it's their favorite restaurant and they get to pick out, you know, the things that work for them to grow their money, especially, you know, young people, my peers. I think that's a big thing that they want to figure out how to do is grow their money over time. I'm both asking you out of pure curiosity and wonder, and also maybe inviting you in some ways, if you'd be willing to, you don't have to share how you've done that over time, but you know, what's your new story from an investment standpoint in a way that kind of works for your financial health, your financial future? Because I think as beautiful as a 0% hyperlocal investing model is, I think a lot of people will shy away from that unless they have a new menu to choose from. And I would guess that your menu behind the scenes of what you've done over the years that you've experimented with and learned is one of those new menus that they could choose from. But as far as I've seen, I don't know if we have access to what you've done to kind of keep up with the Joneses. That's not the best term, but does that make sense?
Yeah, I was right with you until the keeping up with the Jones part. So I'm definitely not trying to keep up with the Joneses. I've never been trying to keep up with the Joneses. I'm just pulling your leg, though. I know.
That was the wrong choice of words. Yep.
Well, let me see how I can try to answer that in a brief answer. I would say, first of all,
because
we're on the soil, just to make sure everyone knows, there are four. You're not coming in well? You can't hear me?
You're good.
Okay.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's a little risky for me to do it through the computer audio, but is it coming through okay or no?
It's okay now, yeah.
I hope it's okay, because it's a hassle to dial in at this point. I am getting a signal up. My signal is a little weak here, but there are 4 soil groups in Colorado right now and 1 in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I think the short answer to your story, Adrian, is I'm not as smart as you think I am, and I haven't done as many interesting things as you think I've done. I've done a few things, and I've stayed focused on them. And my focus really is to just stay on a few things that I really believe in and try to go deep on them. But I really think my answer is to, and by the way, I'm not telling other people to do that. I'm just telling you what I have done, right? So I do think we are called, general we, citizens of planet Earth at this moment, and people interested in soil, and so we're on a call like this together, to go a little new story. And I love the way you started out framing it as a new story. The way I would frame the new story, the macro new story is, we need to, over the next 50 years, participate in a major revisioning of what it means to invest on this planet. Where all these trillions of dollars are going to go, how much of it's going to go to the Defense Department, how much of it's going to go to burning fossil fuel, how much of it's going to go to selling cars and cigarettes in China. All of these things, which is where the massive flows are still going. And I don't think there's a more important thing that we can do with our money than try to steer towards a new story. Now, how we articulate that story. So I think I'm away from 0%. I think it's going to become a thing. Over time, it's going to take a while, not because we're doing it. I think there'll be a lot more groups doing it, meaning the era of investors feeling entitled to take returns out of enterprises rather than leaving the returns in for the benefit of the future is going to need to shift. That's a really radical new story. But I'm not taking anything away from the rest of the menu. I just don't view, I think your menu is excellent. The one thing you didn't have on there much, I don't remember. So now I'll try to answer the other part of your question a little bit. I do know a lot of the socially responsible, triple bottom line, impact investing, financial advisors, and that whole crew, because a lot of the people I've been interacting with over the years have had lots of money moving in and out of all those accounts and everything. So I don't think you mentioned RSF. Maybe you did. RSF, Social Capital, Clean Yield in Vermont, Trillium Asset Management, North Star, Portfolio 21. In other words, there's a whole lot of other products, some of which are readily available to a non-accredited retail investor like Portfolio 21. Up to ecological footprint. For ones I just mentioned are only available if you have $1 million or more. In other words, they take you on as a personal client, so that it's more of an angel investor thing. But there are a lot of those firms, and if you just followed up on some of the ones I just said, they will lead you to a whole bunch of other ones. And I don't know if anybody on the call is looking for that.
All right, so we're losing you, and we're at the end of our time.
Those are people who would tailor. They have deep conversations with people. Okay.
So I've got to stop everybody. because it is 8:01 and people are leaving, and we lost Elaine, and I don't want to lose anybody before I tell us everybody. We need to tell everybody about we're having our next meeting. So Elaine is gone. She asked the question about your favorite investment. You'll have to tell us later. PJ, I'm going to need your help with this piece. So I'm going to unmute you. Many of you have become investors, and we want to encourage anyone that hasn't become one to become one, because we're going to have our annual meeting. We're going to have a meeting, our first meeting of members. And we're going to be approving our bylaws, approving our officers, approving a few other things. And we need you to be, but you can't come and vote unless you're a member. So, and we have a goal of $2,500 a month to raise to reach our goal to get the full match from New Belgium. And so I hope that those of you that have already invested, that you'll come to our meeting, and I'll let PJ say the date. And if you haven't invested yet and you want to come to the meeting on the 16th, then we need you to invest before then, so you can come and vote and help us get everything organized. So, and thank you so much, Adrian. That was beautiful.
I'd just like to say that this meeting on June 16th is a very historic meeting, because it's our first official members-only meeting, and it will be starting from the ground up and starting the organization. I mean, the first vote is approving the name Sangre de Cristo, which I hope will be approved, because Julie and I have a lot riding on that. And then, of course, approving the members of the steering committee, as Julie mentioned, and the bylaws, etc. So we're encouraging everyone who is considering becoming a member to please invest soon. And then, so that's that. And then I mentioned earlier that we've already gone over the 10,000 mark in raising money. So we're well on our way to granting and awarding loans sometime. We don't know when yet. We haven't set our goal yet for the amount of capital that we need, but we have a great momentum going, and thank you all for supporting Sangre de Cristo, as Julian has described. It's our way of building community and keeping our investments here in our community and helping it grow. So with that said, I think that's all the announcements we have, isn't it, Julie?
Yeah, I just want to really thank Adrian for
yes, Adrian, thank you so much.
Donating.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
He donated his time.
Yes. Yeah.
And I did record this, so we'll put it up on a link to it on our website, and Facebook. And we also want to just remind everyone and thank Woody for helping us get this matching fund. So, and all of you that have already become members. I know many of you on this call have already become members. So thank you so much, so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks again, Adrian.
Thank you all so much. Great work. Keep it up. Can't wait to see you at the meeting.
Your book. I'm going to go buy it. Bye.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Woody. Always great to see you.
Woody, thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.